you have created the news. You know that the main outcome and news of today is this. The letter that 23 member states addressed and signed to me today after 1 year and a couple of months of hard common work to notify their common intention to start a permanent structured cooperation. This is the first time that that provision of the Lisbon Treaty, that the Treaty of the European Union is used, so it's quite an historic day. And this is not only the result of hard common work that was just unconceivable 1 year and a half ago, even 6 months ago, and that today is reality. So this original notification on permanent structured cooperation to the Council and the High Representative, I would say, is the outcome of good teamwork that was done, high ambition on the common commitments that will now need to translate into concrete projects of cooperation, but also an inclusive process, because the high number of member states that have joined in this step certifies the fact that this is not let's say a restricted club, but it is open and inclusive. And not only we have 23 member states, but we can have other member states that are currently not part of this notification joining in the coming weeks, keeping the same level of ambition and commitments. I have to say it was a bit of an emotional moment, which is not always the case when we work on European defense. That sometimes is tough and technical. In this case, we all remembered that 1 year and a few months ago we were together in Bratislava discussing the implementation of the global strategy, discussing to use all the instruments that the treaty provides us as a way to referring to permanent structured cooperation as well. And at that time, skepticism was the major feeling in the room. And today we're here. So it's not only with honor and a little bit of emotion, but also with a lot of sense of responsibility that I received today the result of this common work. And now in the coming weeks, we will work together with the member states that notified their intention to start permanent structural cooperation to make it possible for them to take a decision, a council decision, to formally launch permanent structural cooperation and have concrete projects out of the 50 presented, prioritized so that it can start. It's an example of how the European Union can serve member states' priorities, can be efficient and effective, and how our integration is serving our citizens' priorities, in this case, the need to have a more integrated security and defense approach. Because we know that what we can do together, we can do better than alone, country by country. And I wish that the same sense of coming together, being pragmatic and effective, that we have shown in the field of defense, can be of inspiration also for other fields where the European Union is needed by our European citizens. We have also shared these steps with the NATO Secretary General. As always, we have invited him to join our defense ministers meeting, as I was joining the NATO defense ministers just a few days ago. He welcomed these steps, and we discussed all the actions for cooperation that the European Union and NATO has developed in this last year. Let me say that the fact that we have never developed such strong European Union security and defense cooperation, and at the same time we've never developed such a strong cooperation between the European Union and NATO, is the living proof of the fact that the two things can go hand in hand, and actually do. And Stoltenberg and myself will present a second report on the 42 common actions we have taken this year in December to our respective councils, and we will suggest to them further areas of cooperation for the coming year. I would like to say it very clearly, this achievement today is an historic achievement for the European defense, but it's not a celebrating day only, it's the beginning of a journey on which we will together engage, and this is the beginning of a new story. It's not the closing of a page. So this will open the way for the European defense, the European Union of Defense and Security. We made it. And this will continue to constitute the basis for a strong EU-NATO cooperation in the months and years ahead. In the Council, we've always also touched upon other two issues: the preparations for the EU-African Union Summit later this month in Abidjan. That covers, by the way, also some of the security issues on which we work under the defense and security umbrella. And on the other side, our work on strategic communication, where I asked the ministers to support my request to increase the human and financial resources we can dedicate, especially to the 3 strategic communication task force I have established in the course of the last 2 years, one dedicated to the East, one to the Western Balkans, and one to the Arab-speaking world. And I received political support by the ministers on this. Now we will check if the finance ministers will follow the indications of the foreign ministers in the coming weeks. Maybe I will stop here and get some time for replying to your questions.
Thank you very much. As usual, please introduce yourself and the media you're working for, and I'll start with Philippe and then move to Lawrence.
Thank you, Philippe Renier, newspaper Le Soir. Could you tell us what are, at your view, the main reasons why, which was unimaginable 6 months ago, is now the beginning of a new reality? Thank you.
C'est une déclaration politique, le fait que vous posez la question en anglais. As you put the question in English, I will answer in English. Thank you for that. I believe that sometimes in the European Union, but this happens also at national level or in other international setups, people tend to believe that the conditions that have always been there, for good or for bad, are there to stay forever. And this is the most powerful element that prevents change to happen. I believe that last year, in the last 6 months of the year, the second semester of the year, we managed to open the door for possible change. It was a time where everything, for good or for bad, seemed to be possible. It was between the UK referendum results and the election of Trump. So the world was changing in different manners. And the bet that we've made back then was to say, let's see if in front of a complicated security situation, a world that is changing in all different directions, we can try and dismantle the ghosts of the past, the assumption that the European Union of Defense and Security was a taboo since 60 years, could be broken. And if we were in the conditions to use the instruments we have, as the European citizens and our partners need us to use them for. I think it was what one of my favorite, let's say, famous compatriots used to express as the goodwill of, the optimism of goodwill, l'ottimismo della volontà, that managed to break the established perceived taboos. We told to each other, and I suggested to the ministers and to the prime ministers, that this was possible, and this was proven to be possible at the end of the way. Some member states were leading the preparatory works together with us in a very determined manner, and I would like to thank France, Germany, Italy, and Spain for the leading role they have had, but also and especially because they have listened carefully to the need to open these proposals and suggestions to other member states and make sure this was and is an inclusive process that looks at the added value of potentially all member states into more ambitious capability developments, operational engagements, and work on the economy of scale of the European defense. It has been a true teamwork, And this is why I hope, I hope that this can be an inspiration for other sectors of European integration. Sometimes in the European Union, we do not believe in the capacities we have, while we do have capacities. And if you don't believe in yourself, you don't use your capacities and your tools at the best. So we managed to jump over the perception that this was impossible, and we proved it to be possible. Now, I know very well this is a big achievement, an historic achievement. It is somehow taking the dream of our founding fathers and mothers of the 50s and making it true. But we know very well that this is only the beginning. Now we have to turn this political and institutional decision into concrete projects and make of this the difference of security and defense, not only inside Europe, but also in the world. Lawrence?
Hi, thanks a lot. Lawrence Norman at the Wall Street Journal. I read two questions not PESCO related, if I may. One, I gather you raised the topic of Lebanon in your opening comments this morning, and a couple of other ministers weighed in. Is there anything that the EU can usefully do to contribute to calm in the situation in Lebanon? And have you received any information that causes you, as some other ministers said, to question whether Mr. Hariri is completely free to go wherever he wants? And just briefly, the French Foreign Ministry said today Paris supports putting sanctions on Iran over its ballistic missile tests. Would you oppose that?
First of all, let me say that we didn't discuss, not today, not last week, or I don't foresee any discussion also in the future about sanctions, further sanctions from the European Union side on Iran. This is not part of our current discussions, and as you know, we have lifted all our nuclear-related sanctions on Iran in compliance with our own commitments with the JCPOA, and it is extremely important that we keep that. Ballistic missiles are not in the scope of the JCPOA, but this is a discussion and a proposal that was never raised at our table in these recent months, and I don't foresee this to happen in the near future. On Lebanon, indeed it was not part of the agenda of today, but obviously I raised this morning with the foreign ministers, sharing around the table with broad support, I would say unanimous support. First of all, the call for ensuring unity and stability of the country are preserved. I spoke with the foreign minister, Basil, over the phone a couple of days ago. I will meet him tomorrow morning here in Brussels. Our head of the European Union delegation in Riyadh has met Prime Minister Hariri for the second time in these 4 days, just for a few hours ago. So contacts are ongoing, and the substance of these contacts are, and of what we shared with the foreign ministers today, are the following: that the European Union support for Lebanon, Lebanon's institutions, is continuing and very strong. Our partnership, our friendship is special and very strong, including a personal connection, a personal support we have with Prime Minister Hariri that we praise for his leadership, and our close cooperation has always been very strong. We have highlighted, and I think it is right to do so in this moment, the impressive steps that under his leadership the unity government has made in this last 11 months, if I'm not wrong. New budget, a new electoral law, advanced stage for adoption of capital invest plan, positive pace for preparation of the elections, parliamentary elections early next year. All things that seemed to be impossible only 1.5 years ago. So we have appreciated the level of unity of political forces that has led Lebanon to have functioning institutions, delivering some results for their people. We believe it is important at this stage to ensure that all political parties in Lebanon maintain the focus on working together to build these domestic achievements to deliver for the Lebanese people and work together to avoid any escalation in the country. The stability and the progress inside the country are to be preserved and are the priority for us. And our support is there and will continue to be there in this respect. We expect no external interference in this national agenda, and we believe it is essential to avoid importing into Lebanon regional conflicts, regional dynamics, regional tensions that have to stay out of the country. In this respect, again, as I said, I will discuss further with the Foreign Minister Basile tomorrow here in Brussels, and I'm looking forward to have contacts with Prime Minister Hariri in the days to come if conditions are there.
Can I pick you up on that, if I may? I mean, just very briefly.
Very, very quick follow-up,
I mean,
Lawrence,
just
because there
very
is a lot of
simply, do
people
you
waiting.
believe that there is external intervention right now in the affairs of Lebanon?
Daniel.
No. No is not the answer to the question. No is the answer to mine. I see, and we all see the risk for this to happen. Lebanese political forces are the first ones to know by experience that the country is exposed by its nature, by the nature of the composition of their population and their political forces to being exposed to either external influence or internal forces taking part to external conflicts. And this is why Lebanon has a dissociation policy that is important. So Lebanese forces and Lebanese people, I would say, are the first ones that have experienced over history, recent and past history, the danger of having the country dragged into regional conflicts and regional tensions and regional dynamics. This is a current and an always existing threat to the country, both from the inside outside and from the outside inside. This is why, as European Union, as friends of Lebanon, care about the stability and the security of the country more than anything else, and also of the region. We appeal, first of all, as I said, to the political forces to focus on Lebanon and on what they can deliver to their citizens. Prime Minister Hariri to return to his country, and the unity government has delivered results to focus on domestic achievements to be consolidated.
And Daniel.
Daniel Brosler, Süddeutsche Zeitung. High Representative, if PESCO works, it will create capabilities, instruments, but aren't you worried that at the end of the day there might be no use for those capabilities and instruments because there is no unity, no political will to, for example, rapidly deploy troops in case of emergencies? So where do you take your optimism from?
I have many worries, but not this one. In this 3 years in office, exactly, more or less, I have experienced one thing, that the political unity of the European Union in foreign and security policy is much stronger than it is perceived, both internally and externally. We have never, with the foreign ministers, with the defense ministers, experienced once a problem of unanimity in decision making. On top of that, PESCO will not be working by unanimity at 28, as obvious, and by definition, it's a permanent structured cooperation that will be established by qualified majority voting. So when member states engage in developing capabilities, working together on research, development of industrial projects, but also acquisition together, but also operational commitments, it is clear that this political will gets even stronger. And as I said, in these 3 years of experience, I have never seen a problem of lack of common will, but I have often seen a problem of political will not matched by consequent decisions when it came to pledging conferences or fourth generation conferences or exercises to have adequate resources, both financial, human resources, or military resources, to fulfill our level of ambition. So I'm not worried about the lack of political cohesion. On the contrary, I think that this will give us the right instruments to do what I see we are already ready to do together.
Antonio.
Thank you. Antonio Delgado from the Spanish Public Radio. I read during the debate today about the strategic communication. I think that the Spanish minister has talked about the possibility of that Russia or someone in Russia is trying to use the Catalonia problem in order to destabilize the European Union. I wonder if you, as the EEAS, do you have also this information that someone in Russia or maybe the Russian government is trying to use this particular crisis in order to exacerbate the problems in the European Union?
I would not comment on that. We had a discussion on strategic communication in general, covered several elements and different areas of our work. I would not comment on this specific case.
Marina.
Marina Maximovic, Tanjung News Agency, Deutsche Welle. Madame Mogherini, we have a question regarding the strategic communications on Western Balkans exactly. What is your opinion about the Russian influence in that part, in that region, and what is the Stratcom doing concretely to combat these influences? Thank you.
The very small strategic communication task force I have set up this summer only, so a few months ago, on the Western Balkans has just started its work. So it's too early to assess the result of the work, but let me say that I visited the region very often, and there is not one single week that I don't meet either a prime minister, a president, a foreign minister, or a European minister of the region. This is probably one of the files on which we're working the most. And this is in itself part of our strategic communication, because you can have the best technical team doing strategic communication if you don't have the right policy. There's not much you can communicate about. On the Western Balkans, we do have a strong European Union stand and a strong European Union policy that is the basis for our effective communication. So we can improve the communication. I think the policy is already improved a lot when we are clear in saying the future of the entire region is in the European Union. We want and we need the Western Balkans to cooperate as a region and to have this clear sense of direction towards the European Union, and mentioning for six different steps and stages. Each of them has its own specificity, but the clear and joint sense of direction of the region. So I'm not worried for the influence or the presence of any of the other partners that countries in the region can have, because I have seen it myself and repeatedly, even during the course of last year, where many countries faced complicated political or electoral cycles, to call it this way. When the European Union is there, and it's there with all its power, with all its presence, coherently, there is no other partner that has a stronger influence than the European Union in the region, because the region is Europe. You look at the borders, there is no external border of any of the Western Balkan six. Their borders are all borders with European Union. We are one, we are a family, we are geographically and historically bound together, and this is why when the European Union is consistent and coherent, and with our partners in the region are also consistent and coherent, no other influence or presence can be stronger than that.
Anna.
Thank you. So two quick questions on strategic communications. What's the team, the volume of the team and budget that you think would be fit to counter an increasing, especially propaganda coming from Russia, but also the need to do more work in countering radical messages from ISIS and trying to keep appeasement between the youth? And my second quick question, if I may, it's on Venezuela. After we've created the legal framework for sanctioning individual responsible people for violations of human rights and others, how long do you think, or how fast do you think the EU will move into concrete sanctions, and the EAS will wait for member states to present a concrete list of names, or in other cases sometimes the EAS per se works itself on the list? So how do you see that developing? Thank you.
On the numbers that would require in the strategic communication task force, I am not the most experienced or technically skilled person to answer to that question. We have a division, a unit that is working every single day on our communication, and I leave to their assessment what kind of needs are there for the different task force, because while for our communication on the East task force, we have started work since 2 years. The work is quite established. We would need to expand that, and I proposed to have additional resources already. I mean, this is not the first time I do this. It was the Council rejecting that proposal when I did it, while the Parliament was always supporting it. I hope that the Council this time will support my proposal and the European Parliament amendments to increase the budget for our strategic communication task force as a matter of consistency. While the Stratcom East is well established and works at full rhythm, the Western Balkans and the Arabic speaking one are just at the beginning and definitely need more resources, being it financial or seconded experts, especially people that have the right language skills to work on effective communication. I would like to stress one point. It is not just about countering negative perceptions or fake news. It is also about communicating effectively our positive agenda. And to me, this is even the most important part, maybe, of the work we're doing. Because both inside the European Union and outside of the European Union, communicating effectively and correctly what the European Union is and does is in itself the most powerful instrument for strategic communication. So we're focusing a lot on the positive agenda, the positive stories, and the difference that the European Union external action is bringing to the citizens of the region of concern. On Venezuela, you know that first of all, the decision that was taken today is in the framework of our continuous diplomatic and political work to try and facilitate an outcome to the crisis. In this framework, the Council has decided by unanimity to adopt restrictive measures. First of all, an arm embargo on related materials that might be used for internal repression, and, as you mentioned, a legal framework for a travel ban and an asset freeze. That is only the legal framework for the moment, without names on it. These measures will be used in a gradual manner, flexible. It can be expanded, but it can also be reversed. And you asked depending on what and with what timing. The matter is not the timing, it's not the calendar. The matter is the evolution of the situation in the country. And in particular, I would like to stress this, the holding of credible and meaningful negotiations. There are works ongoing, preparations of meetings, and also in the coming days. We hope, actually, and personally, I only hope that this decision stays as a legal framework only, because we have steps on the political negotiations that are positive enough that allow these measures not to go further. I would like to stress an additional point, because this is very dear to my heart, but also to all of our thoughts, which is that all the work that we're trying to do is to support the Venezuelan people. So no measure, I would like to stress this, is or will harm the Venezuelan population. Our intention is only to support the population of Venezuela. So the step has been decided today is a first step that can be reversed if political conditions allow us to understand that there are credible and meaningful negotiations that start and will be otherwise used in a gradual and flexible manner.
I'll take the last question from Gabaya, because we then unfortunately need to wrap up.
Thank you. Gabaya Lucy, Deutsche Welle Africa Service. High Representative, on the EU Africa Summit, can you just say a little more about the preparation and the priorities? And the second question, if I may, did you discuss about the blockade in Yemen, because about 7 million people are in danger, and it looks like that the international community is not giving attention. Did you discuss about it? Thank you.
We have not discussed this today, but we've discussed it several other times, and I am sure that in December, the next Foreign Affairs Council, we will have a point on the agenda. I'm not completely sure still if it's going to be on Yemen specific, but on the Middle East dynamics for sure. But this is an issue on which our work is ongoing on a daily basis, discreetly most of the times, but we're doing our best, not only from the humanitarian point of view, but also from a political point of view. On the EU-African Union Summit, I thank you very much for the question, because this has been actually a long part of our conversation today with the ministers, with all member states very much engaged in the preparation for the summit. That will be the turning point of the African Union, European Union political relations. It's the first time the European Union has a summit with the African Union as such. This is in itself already a sign of how deep our political partnership has gone. I would like to say it very clearly, it will not be a migration summit. It's not the follow-up of the Valletta summit. It's a summit on the partnership between the European Union and the African Union on many different fields, from peace and security, where we need to increase even more our cooperation, on global issues like climate change and environmental issues, to economy, investments, creation of jobs, education. I met just last week 36 young people from Africa, Europe and diaspora to listen to their suggestions. They've been working for weeks now, and they will continue to work in view of the summit to give us inputs that translate into real policy decisions on many different fields, from education to culture to peace and security and other issues, with very concrete ideas that we will need to follow up. So this time it's really going beyond the traditional development aid approach. It's not a donor-recipient summit. It's a summit between political partners that share the same approach to global issues and multilateralism, and that have a common agenda to develop together. That includes also some elements on migration, but I would like to stress, if Europe and Africa agree together on how they can help the world manage one of the most challenging phenomena in the world, which is the mass movement of people, including within Africa, then we also help the United Nations system to come up with a global compact on migration and on refugees, and this is exactly the approach we will be taking.
I'm afraid that's all we have time for. Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you.